I stood in the corner of my own ballroom, holding a silver tray of champagne flutes, watching strangers admire the marble columns I'd designed 30 years ago. "Oh, you're so lucky to have live-in help," Tiffany chirped to her circle of influencer friends, her phone already angled for the perfect shot. "Eleanor is just wonderful. She does everything, cooking, cleaning, managing the house. I honestly don't know what we'd do without our housekeeper." Housekeeper. The word landed like a slap. I'd given birth to her husband. I'd paid for the Hermes bag dangling from her wrist. I'd signed the check that funded her last 3 trips to Santorini. But sure. Housekeeper. Julian stood beside her, laughing. My son, my beautiful, ungrateful son, actually laughed. He caught my eye for half a second, and I saw something flicker there. Embarrassment. Maybe. Or was it just annoyance that I was making things awkward by existing? "Eleanor," Tiffany called, snapping her manicured fingers. "Be a dear and refresh everyone's drinks, would you?" I smiled. I'd perfected that smile over 3 decades of swallowing words that would burn bridges. I walked to their circle with the tray, my heels clicking against the floor I'd chosen tile by tile, when this house was just blueprints and dreams. "Of course," I said, my voice steady as bedrock. I set down the tray and reached into my pocket, pulling out a single key on a simple ring. I placed it in Tiffany's palm, her confusion briefly interrupting her Instagram pose. "The house is yours now," I said. "All of it. I'm sure you'll manage beautifully." Julian's smile faltered. "Mom, what are you—" "Oh, and Julian." I turned to my son, that same serene smile never wavering. "Best of luck with that loan payment, the one coming due next week, for the luxury condo project on Riverside Drive." The colour drained from his face. "You might want to check the trust documents your father left, specifically the section about land use authorization." I smoothed my black dress, the one I'd worn to my husband's funeral 5 years ago. "Turns out the property you've been planning to bulldoze for your $1 million development? It requires my signature to proceed." I lifted a champagne flute from the tray and raised it to the room. To new beginnings. Then I walked out of the ballroom, out of the house, out of the life I'd built for people who saw me as furniture. Let me tell you who I used to be. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I was supposed to change the skyline. At 25, I graduated top of my class from Cornell's architecture program. At 27, I was the youngest junior architect at Morrison and Hayes, one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms. At 29, I designed my first building, a mixed-use development in Brooklyn that won a sustainability award and got featured in Architectural Digest. At 30, I met Thomas Vance at a construction site. He was the structural engineer who made my impossible designs possible. He had kind eyes and rough hands and a laugh that made me believe in collaboration instead of competition. At 31, I married him. At 32, I got pregnant with Julian. And at 33, I made the choice that would define the next 3 decades of my life. I quit. Not because Thomas asked me to, not because anyone forced my hand, but because in 1993, the world still believed you couldn't be both, a mother and an architect, a caregiver and a creator. Someone had to sacrifice, and I'd been raised to believe that someone should be me. "It's just for a few years," I told myself, packing up my drafting table, my reference books, my dreams. "Just until Julian's in school. Just until things settle down." 22 years later, Julian graduated from college. I was still making excuses, still convincing myself that my time would come, still waiting for permission to want something for myself. Then Thomas got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, diagnosed on a Tuesday, and gone by Christmas. He died holding my hand in the house we'd designed together, making me promise I'd finish the community centre we'd dreamed about building. "Don't let Julian talk you out of it," he'd whispered, his voice already fading. "He means well, but he doesn't understand. Buildings aren't just structures, Eleanor. They're legacy. They're proof we were here." I'd promised. And then I'd spent 5 years letting Julian convince me I was too old. too out of touch, too grief-stricken to make important decisions. 5 years of watching my son treat me like I was fragile instead of formidable. 5 years of becoming invisible in my own home. Until tonight. Until I remembered that before I was Julian's mother or Thomas's wife, I was Eleanor Vance. And Eleanor Vance didn't just design buildings, she built them. That was 3 months ago. 3 months since I'd slept in a bed I'd made with my own hands, in an apartment I'd rented with money from the savings account Julian didn't know existed. 3 months since I'd opened my laptop and stared at design software I hadn't touched since 1993, the year Julian was born, and I'd made the choice every successful woman is told to make: career or family, never both. I'd chosen family, and they'd chosen to treat me like the hired help. The morning after the party, I sat in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, scrolling through my phone. 47 missed calls from Julian, 63 text messages ranging from "Mum, we need to talk," to "You're being ridiculous," to "My personal favourite, do you have any idea how much money is at stake?" I deleted them all. Instead, I opened the folder I'd been compiling for the past 6 months. Ever since I'd discovered the truth about Julian's successful real estate career. Ever since I'd found the documents in his home office. The ones that showed every property he'd flipped, every commission he'd earned, every luxury purchase he'd made, all funded by loans, secured against my house, my inheritance, the home my husband and I had designed together before cancer took him at 53. Julian had been forging my signature for 5 years. My hands should have shaken. They should have trembled with rage or hurt or betrayal. Instead, they were steady as I sipped my coffee and opened the contact information for Marcus Chen, a contractor I'd met at a sustainable building expo the previous year. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Eleanor Vance. I was wondering if you'd ever call." "I have a proposition for you," I said. "How would you feel about building something that actually matters?" The property in question was 2.3 acres of prime Manhattan real estate, nestled between 2 developing neighborhoods. My husband had purchased it in 1998, back when we still believed in growing old together, back when we dreamed of designing a community arts center that would outlive us both. Then cancer happened. Then grief happened. Then Julian happened, convincing me I was too old, too tired, too out of touch to understand modern architecture or urban development. "Let me handle it, Mom," he'd said, so earnest, so concerned. "You focus on taking care of yourself. I'll make sure Dad's legacy means something." He'd meant a 40-story luxury condo with penthouses starting at $12 million. I sat in Marcus's office watching him review the trust documents my lawyer had pulled from the county recorder's office. Real documents this time, not the forged ones Julian had been operating under. "Your son doesn't have legal authority to develop this land," Marcus said, his finger tracing the relevant clause. "According to this, you're the sole trustee. Any major decisions require your written consent, verified by a notary public." "I know." "He's already taken deposits from investors, pre-sold 18 units." "I know that too." Marcus looked up, studying my face. He was younger than Julian by a decade, but his eyes held something my son had never learned: respect. "What do you want to build instead?" he asked. I pulled out the sketches I'd been working on for the past month. Late nights, early mornings, the pencil moving across paper the way it used to when architecture was my language and buildings were my poetry. "A community centre," I said. "Art studios on the ground floor, available to local residents for free. A rooftop garden maintained by neighbourhood volunteers. Mid-rise affordable housing units. Actual affordable, not luxury marketed as accessible." I spread the drawings across his desk. "And I want to call it the Thomas Vance Memorial Centre after my husband, the man who believed buildings should serve people, not profit margins." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "When do we start?" Julian showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday. I'd been expecting him. The lawsuit he'd filed against me, claiming I was mentally incompetent and attempting to seize control of the trust, had been dismissed the previous Friday. Apparently, Judges aren't impressed when you try to declare your mother senile while she's actively running a successful architectural consulting business under a professional pseudonym. Oh, did I forget to mention that part? In the 3 months since I'd left, I'd completed designs for 4 sustainable housing projects across Brooklyn and Queens. I'd lectured at Columbia's architecture school. I'd been interviewed by Architectural Digest about the mysterious new voice in urban planning who signed all her work simply as EVA. Eleanor Vance, architect. The name I'd buried when I'd become Julian's mother. Mom. He stood in my doorway, looking smaller somehow, diminished. We need to talk. Do we? I stayed seated, my laptop open to a rendering of the community centre, because I seem to recall you haven't wanted to talk to me as anything other than your personal assistant for the better part of a decade. That's not fair, isn't it? I closed the laptop gently. When's my birthday, Julian? He blinked. What? My birthday? What's the date? He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. It's in April. June 14th. I turned 55 this year. You didn't call, didn't text, didn't acknowledge it at all. I stood, crossing to the small kitchen of my apartment. Would you like coffee? I know how to make it. Shocking, I realise, given that I'm apparently just a housekeeper. Tiffany was out of line that night. I told her. You laughed. My voice cut through his excuse like a blade through butter. You stood there and you laughed while your wife called your mother the help. While strangers who were drinking my wine and eating food I'd prepared laughed along with her. I poured 2 cups of coffee anyway. Habits die hard. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry for all of it, for not defending you, for taking advantage of your generosity, for forging my signature on legal documents, for mortgaging my house without my knowledge, for lying to investors about having development rights you don't actually possess. He went pale. How did you... I'm not stupid, Julian. I'm not incompetent. I'm not too old to understand contracts or too addled to read financial statements. I set his coffee cup on the counter between us. I'm just done being treated like I am. The investors are threatening to sue me. They want their deposits back. I don't have the money, Mom. The development was supposed to... Supposed to what? Make you rich. Make you important. I sipped my coffee, black, no sugar. What about what that land was supposed to be, what your father and I planned? Dad's been dead for 5 years, plans change. You're right. They do. I pulled out my phone, showed him the renderings Marcus and I had been working on. This is the new plan. The Thomas Vance Memorial Centre. We break ground next month. Julian stared at the screen. At the community gardens and art studios and affordable housing units. At everything his luxury development wasn't. You're doing this to punish me, he said. No, sweetheart. I took the phone back, slipped it into my pocket. I'm doing this to honour a man who believed in building things that last, things that matter, things that serve people instead of exploit them. I moved toward the door, opened it. I'm doing this because I finally remembered who I was before I became your mother. Before I became the woman who made herself small so you could feel big. So that's it, his voice cracked. You're just done with me? I paused in the doorway. I'll always be your mother, Julian. I'll always love you, but I won't be your doormat anymore. I won't be your ATM or your personal assistant or your invisible safety net. I met his eyes, saw my own pain reflected there. When you're ready to know me as a person, as Eleanor, not just Mom, you know where to find me. He left without drinking his coffee. I poured it down the sink and got back to work. Tiffany's Instagram post went viral 2 weeks later. The Truth About Toxic Parents, she'd titled it, her face perfectly made up, tears strategically placed. She talked about how I'd abandoned my family, how I'd cruelly withheld financial support, how I was weaponizing money to control Julian's life. The comments section was predictably divided. Half the internet called me a narcissistic monster. The other half asked why a grown man in his 30s needed his mother's financial support in the first place. I didn't respond. Instead, I posted a single piece of content on a newly created Instagram account. No lengthy caption, no dramatic confrontation, just a 2-minute video compilation. The first half. Tiffany's voice from the party, crystal clear thanks to the voice recorder I'd been carrying in my pocket that night. Eleanor is just wonderful. She does everything: cooking, cleaning, managing the house. I honestly don't know what we'd do without our housekeeper. The second half. A spreadsheet. 5 years of bank statements showing transfers from my accounts to Julian's. Mortgage payments, credit card bills, a car lease, Tiffany's shopping sprees and spa days, and influencer trips. Total amount, 847,000 tals. I captioned it simply, "The housekeeper's receipts." The internet is undefeated when it comes to swift justice. Tiffany's followers evaporated overnight. Her sponsorship deals disappeared. The lifestyle she'd built on my money and someone else's labor crumbled like the house of cards it had always been. Julian's real estate license was suspended pending an investigation into fraudulent documentation. And I went back to my drafting table and kept designing. Marcus and I stood on the property on a bright October morning, watching the construction crew break ground. The air smelled like disturbed earth and possibility. "Your son's lawyer called again," Marcus said, not quite asking a question. I know. I did know. Julian had tried everything: legal threats, emotional manipulation, showing up at my apartment with Tiffany in tow for a tearful apology that felt more like a performance than genuine remorse. I'd listened, I'd acknowledged his pain, and then I'd held firm. "He wants to know if you'll sell him the land," Marcus continued. "Says he has new investors, a new plan. Something about affordable housing." I laughed, sharp and bright as broken glass. Now he cares about affordable housing. How convenient. "What do you want me to tell him?" I pulled out my phone, showed Marcus the latest rendering. We'd added a mural to the east wall, designed by local artists. A memorial garden with benches engraved with my husband's favourite quotes about architecture and community. "Tell him the land isn't for sale. Tell him it never was." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "Tell him his mother is building something that will outlast all of us." The excavator's engine roared to life, metal teeth biting into earth that had sat empty for too long. "And tell him that when he's ready to visit, not to ask for money, not to negotiate, but to actually see what we're creating, he's welcome any time." Marcus nodded, pulling out his own phone to make the call. I watched the machine work, watched the first foundation hole take shape. In 6 months there would be walls here. In a year, windows and doors. In 2 years, people, real people with real lives and real dreams, would walk through those doors and find space to create, to grow, to become. My husband and I had designed this property on our honeymoon, sketching ideas on napkins in a seaside restaurant in Maine. He'd been dead for 5 years. But this was him alive again. This was us, still building, still dreaming. This was the life I'd paused when Julian was born, the career I'd shelved, the identity I'd folded up and put away like an old blueprint. I'd spent 30 years being someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's support system. It was time to be Eleanor again. The grand opening was on a Saturday in May, exactly 2 years after that ballroom party where Tiffany had called me a housekeeper. The community centre rose 4 stories, all clean lines and sustainable materials, with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the morning light and threw it back, transformed. The rooftop garden was already flourishing, maintained by a dedicated group of neighbourhood volunteers who'd been working with us since the project began. I stood at the entrance in a simple navy dress, greeting arrivals, local families, artists, students. The mayor had even sent a representative, impressed by the affordable housing model we'd implemented. Marcus stood beside me, his contracting company's name proudly displayed on a plaque inside the lobby. "You should be proud," he said. "This is extraordinary." "We should be proud," I corrected. "This isn't mine. It belongs to everyone who helped build it." That's when I saw him. Julian, walking slowly up the path, alone. No Tiffany, no lawyers. Just my son, looking older somehow, wearing a simple button-down and jeans instead of the designer suits he'd favoured. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. "Hi, Mom." "Julian." I didn't move toward him. Didn't make it easy. He looked up at the building, at the words carved above the entrance. Thomas Vance Memorial Centre. "Dad would have loved this." Yes, he would have. A long silence stretched between us, filled with 2 years of distance and hurt and growth. "Tiffany and I are divorced," he said finally. "She left when the money dried up. Turns out she loved the lifestyle more than she loved me." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" He met my eyes and I saw something new there, something like self-awareness. "I'm sorry you're in pain," I said carefully. "I'm not sorry you learned what conditional love looks like." He nodded slowly. "I've been going to therapy, trying to figure out why He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at everything unsaid between us. "Why I treated you like you were disposable." "And what did you learn?" "That I took you for granted, that I confused your strength for weakness, that I believed the lie I told myself, that you'd always be there, always give, always sacrifice, no matter how I treated you." His voice cracked, "And that when you finally stopped, I lost the best person in my life." I felt tears prick my eyes but didn't let them fall. Not yet. "I spent 30 years making myself smaller so you could feel bigger," I said. "I gave up my career, my identity, my dreams, and I told myself it was worth it because I was building something. A family, a future." I gestured at the building behind me. "But you can't build something sustainable on a foundation of one-sided sacrifice. Eventually it collapses." "I know that now." "Do you?" I took a step closer. "Because knowing and changing are 2 different things, Julian. I don't need your apologies. I need to see who you become when you're not leaning on someone else's foundation." He was quiet for a long moment, watching families stream past us into the centre. "Can I see it?" he asked. "The building?" I considered. Weighed years of hurt against the tentative hope in his voice. "Yes," I said finally. "But you walk in as a visitor, not as my son expecting special treatment. You look at what we've built here, what community and collaboration and honest work can create. And then, if you want, we can talk." We walked through the centre together, me pointing out the sustainable features, the accessible design, the art studios already filled with people creating. Julian asked thoughtful questions, noticed details, actually listened when I spoke. At the rooftop garden, we stood looking out over the city, the same skyline I'd designed buildings into 30 years ago. "I'm studying for my contractor's license," Julian said quietly. "Not real estate, construction. I want to build things instead of just selling them." "That's good. Marcus said you might need someone for the Queen's project, the affordable housing development you're designing." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised who'd nearly broken me with his carelessness. "Are you asking for a job?" "I'm asking for a chance to learn from you. Not as your son who expects handouts, but as someone who wants to understand what you do, how you do it, why it matters." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of herbs from the garden beds behind us. "The position pays standard entry-level wages," I said. "You'll start as a general labourer. Long hours, hard work, no special treatment. I understand. And Julian?" I turned to face him fully. "If you take this job, you show up on time, you work hard, and you treat everyone, from the architects to the day labourers, with respect. Because the moment you don't, you're fired. I don't care if you're my son. Clear?" "Clear." I held out my hand, professional, formal. "Then welcome to the team." He took it, his grip firm, his eyes wet. "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it." "I didn't do this for you," I said gently. "I did this for me, because I finally learned that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you." We stood there on that rooftop, the city sprawling below us, the future uncertain but no longer terrifying. For 30 years, I'd built my life around being someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's support system. Now I was Eleanor Vance, architect, builder of communities, creator of spaces where people could grow and dream and become. And if my son wanted to be part of that world, really part of it, not just coasting on my sacrifice, then he'd have to earn it, just like everyone else. The grand opening celebration continued below us, laughter and music drifting up from the courtyard. I'd built this. Not alone, but I'd built it. Without apology. Without making myself small. I looked at Julian, at this man who was finally learning what it meant to stand on his own foundation instead of mine. "Come on," I said, heading toward the stairs. "We have a lot of work to do." And for the first time in years, when I said we, I meant it as equals. Not mother and son, not benefactor and dependent, just two people. Building something that would last long after we were both gone. Something real. Something that mattered. Something worthy of the name carved above the door.